We will move on to our first panel of the day, What the Industry Expects. I would like to invite our moderator for this session, Mr. Anurag Saxena, Principal and Head of Digital Health Consulting and Solutions at IQVIA South Asia, to take the screen.
Thank you, Julia. So we can move to the next slide, please. Great. So thank you. Thanks a lot for the kind introduction. Let me just quickly thank the NATHEAL team and TIE team for giving me the opportunity to moderate this session. It is indeed an honor and a privilege to be moderating this discussion today. We have a very power-packed panel consisting of leaders from healthcare provider industry, diagnostic industry, and medtech industry. So let me just quickly introduce the esteemed panelists. So we have Mr. Harshad Reddy, who is the Director of Operations at Apollo Proton Cancer Care Hospital. Apollo Proton is Southeast Asia's first proton therapy center and a 150-bed integrated cancer hospital that provides affordable and revolutionary radiation oncology and surgical treatments. Harshad has provided leadership oversight for setting up of APCC, right from the project conceptualization stage to construction to PMO. He has also led the go-to-market planning, operational planning, and recruitment of key personnel for the unit. Apart from this role, he has also been a director at Apollo Home Care that supports over 70,000 families annually with a better home care facility and best-in-class patient support. Moving forward, let me take the opportunity of introducing Dr. Om Manchanda. Dr. Manchanda needs no introduction, but let me, for the benefit of the group, let me quickly introduce that Dr. Manchanda has been instrumental in setting up Lal Path Labs in the last 16 years, and he has successfully scaled it up from a small business, personally run and India's largest medical diagnostics company today. Dr. Manchanda also successfully led the IPO of the company in 2015, and which was the first company to be listed in diagnostic space in India. Dr. Manchanda's career spans over 3 decades, and he has worked in various industries, including FMCG, agri-imports, consumer healthcare, and he has also spent about a decade with Hindustan Unilever. Dr. Manchanda won the EY Entrepreneur of the Award in 2019 in Healthcare and Life Sciences category. Recently also received the Healthcare Personality of the Year 2020 award in the FICCI Healthcare Excellence Awards in September 2020. Moving forward, let me introduce Ms. Meenakshi Nevatia. Meenakshi is the Managing Director of Striker India, and she has been playing this role since 2018. In this period, she has focused on transforming the organization into a truly consumer-focused company while significantly strengthening the operational basics and building a vibrant organization culture. Prior to joining Striker, Meenakshi has spent about 15 years with Novartis Pharma, where she held various leadership positions across several geographies. Meenakshi is also on the board of Medical Technology Association of India, the governing council of NATHEAL, and she is also the chair of MedTech Committee at American Chamber of Commerce. Moving forward, we also have Dr. Bidhur Mahajan, who is Head of Research and Development at Caring, and he's also an Associate Director at Mahajan Imaging. Dr. Mahajan has been running Caring, the Center of Advanced Research on Imaging, Neuroscience and Genomics, which works with more than 30 research groups across the world and aims to bring cutting-edge products in artificial intelligence into clinical practice. Dr. Mahajan has also been playing the role of running Mahajan Imaging, which is one of the leading medical imaging providers in India, and Caring DX, which is an advanced molecular diagnostic lab. With this, let me kick off the discussion, and probably I'll ask one question to each of the panelists. And let me go with ladies first, right? So Meenakshi, I would like to ask you and the other panelists on what are some of the emerging areas where the startups could collaborate and support some of the initiatives that you're doing. And maybe if you can talk about some of the initiatives that are being taken by your organization to engage more closely with the startups, that would be really helpful for the group that we have here.
Anurag, thanks for the question, and good evening, everybody. Firstly, congratulations to Nat Health and TIE for hosting this event. I think it's a perfect opportunity, perfect timing, because both the industry as well as startups are struggling with how to really work with each other and maximize the potential. So really appreciate the time. So to come to your question, Anurag, I think maybe I'll address it in two ways. The first was, what are those emerging needs? And I think the team so far, people who've spoken covered it well, but I see it in 3 to 4 buckets, at least from a Striker perspective. Striker is a medical technology company, one of the large ones, and in addition to our commercial operations here, we also have one of our biggest R&D centers. And what we see, the 3 or 4 areas emerging, I think the most obvious one is the patient interface, where of course already startups are playing quite a big role in helping us interact with patients in a much more faster and a kind of agile way than ever before. I think the second that I'm beginning to hear, especially with some of the hospitals that we are working with, not necessarily the big corporate chains, but the individual owner managed hospitals, is the interaction between the hospital and the patient, because the patient comes to the hospital, goes, and often there's no system of a follow through, particularly for the smaller hospitals. So how to keep that engagement going, how to ensure the patient is keeping well and coming back at the right time for checkups. I think that piece is another critical one, which corporate hospitals can do themselves, but the smaller ones are really relying on some startup type opportunities to really help there. The third one I find, which has been, which I think COVID was like a wake up call, was really the information tracking. And what I mean by that is, of course, we all tapped into all kinds of information to understand where to get oxygen, where to get beds, where to get medicines. But when we talk to our patients, we work in the area of orthopedics, in the area of cancer, in the area of gastro. Often patients do not know what technology is available where. They do not know, where to go for different type of surgeries. They do not know what is the most leading technology. I mean, they don't have all the information at their fingertips. So how can we have some kind of a system that patients could really identify where to go to for what, because they're really struggling at this point. So, I mean, I can keep on with this list. I'm sure there are many other areas my colleagues will highlight, but actually across our business system, there are plenty of opportunities where we as companies can really work with startups. And to your second question, in terms of what are we doing, as I said, our R&D center is almost 1,300 people. And what we are beginning to do is set up a specific new product division within that is starting to reach out to startups, but in an ad hoc way, I must admit. When we find out something, we reach out to try and see whether there's partnership opportunities. And in addition, we've just recently started, still informal, I'd say, but at least started some kind of a collaboration with IIT Kanpur to start tapping into some ideas that, we can test, we can scale up, as Ishika said, either co-create or develop, whichever one makes sense. So we are still just starting out, a lot more work to be done, but the opportunity is huge.
Thank you, Meenakshi. Let me ask Harshad now if he can share his thoughts on what are some of these areas where he feels startups could collaborate, and maybe talk about some of the work that he is planning to do with startups. Harshad?
Thank you, Anurag. Thank you, Anurag. It's a pleasure to be on this panel. Firstly, I'd like to say, the timing is right. We are in a very important stage in healthcare service delivery. COVID has been a catalyst to it, I would say, as well. The needs of our customers are changing, and we all do believe that they deserve the best. And we are not in this alone, and we would have to work with all the stakeholders involved to be able to deliver what our customer needs. Stating that, the Apollo Group has always been very receptive to new ideas and worked with several new initiatives and with startups. Few areas of interest for us, which Ishika did already mention, would be new ways for point of care testing and diagnostics. We're seeing that our customers are demanding this. I've realized this with my exposure in the home care services as well. And I think it's an exciting space to be in. We do believe that this is going to be the new frontier of diagnostics, and we would be happy to work with startups in this area. Cost-effective genetic testing is something that we believe is an area that startups can look at. I know some entities are doing it in India, but being exposed to oncology, I'm seeing that the need is huge and affordability is a big issue. And we'd be very happy to explore with anyone thinking on those lines. Augmented reality, virtualization, and augmented reality is another area as well. We believe, the education for medical education as well as counseling of our patients and certain procedures could be visualized using these technologies. And this is an exciting area. And I would urge anyone looking at it to give it a serious thought. Stating all of that, I don't have an exhaustive list in front of me, but would always
I think we seem to have lost Harsha's audio. So let me switch over to Dr. Manchanda. Dr. Manchanda, if you can just talk about some of the work that you feel can be done with startups, and is there any specific initiatives being planned by you that will really help the audience?
Yeah, thanks, Anurag. I just want to check whether I'm audible because I'm actually outside on the road right now. Am I clear?
Yes, you can. We can see you also. Please
Okay,
go.
wonderful. Yeah, thanks. So I think as I was preparing for this session on the way, I actually just thought I'll probably highlight a few areas where startups have big role to play to help establish traditional players. And my list actually goes up to about 8 points, and I will probably run through those 8 points. Uh, I think number one is a lot of healthcare players are sitting on tons of data. It's become fashionable to talk about data science and AI, machine learning, and all that. And I'll be honest that most of them actually don't know how to deal with this whole thing. They have data, much of it is not readable format, it's disorganized. Uh, while they have all the information which is required to be filled up, but I'm afraid that it's in a proper shape and form which actually can be used. And I think startup ecosystem actually can work with many of us to help us clean up the whole stuff. And then obviously that's the first stage. Next is of course doing deep analysis on that. But I think to my mind, startup has big opportunity of working with many of us to clean up our databases. The number two is patient behavior. Of course, the whole world consumer behavior is seeing a big change, and so is in healthcare. Patient behavior has changed quite a bit, and some of us do feel that once the COVID settles down, uh, there may be some of it may come back to the normal part. But I do believe that post-COVID landscape is definitely going to be very different than pre-COVID. In that patient behavior, I think one of the things that we are observing is that the interface with patient is no more now patient walking into any of our facility. They want to access, consume healthcare sitting at home, office, or on the go. So technically, it's technology which is going to be consumer facing on mobile smartphones. I think that's another area where startups can work and help existing players because some of us actually lack ability to really and adopt some of these technologies. We know that it's required, but we still need startup ecosystem because legacy systems will find it difficult to transition in a manner, in a rapid way, which is probably demand of need of the hour. The third area which I find very interesting is that healthcare is a very fragmented business. And you don't have large scale players, but you have single unit uh, infrastructure. Let's say you have one nursing home, you have one lab, you have one diagnostic center, but you don't have chains of diagnostic centers. And unfortunately, when you have a single unit, you are actually trying to do everything to every customer. I do believe going forward, this is going to get fragmented. The value chain will get fragmented, which essentially means, to give you an example, like let's say pathology, you have a collection as one area, you have a logistics another area, and third is the testing as another area, and reporting as a fourth area. Now, I think many players in the past might be used to do everything from end to end. I do believe that this fragmentation will happen going forward. I think startups actually can pick one area and start to excel in that. The fourth I find is integrated ecosystem, which I think the earlier speaker talked about. There's a full stack model which is emerging where all healthcare facilities, services are coming under one roof. And we see some of these large players like Pharmacy, etc., trying to build ecosystems, which is full stack model. Clearly, startup ecosystem can help some players who really want to go in that direction. The fifth one is productivity enhancement. I think this is a big one. I do believe that healthcare operates in a very inefficient manner. And that's one of the reasons why you see large players actually becoming larger, because they can operate on a much higher level of efficiency. So technology can help enhance productivity. This morning we had another CII session where I had somebody who was talking about teleradiology, how it has really helped productivity enhancement. The sixth area that I have is on accuracy. Now, this whole, we have, let's take example of pathology. We have a lot of machines, analyzers, we do a lot of chemical analysis, etc. But I think clubbed with data science, you can further take the level of clinical excellence to a different level. So again, startup ecosystem can help. The seventh area is remote access. I think our country needs this more than anyone else, because bottom of the pyramid, tier 2, tier 3 towns don't have access to quality healthcare. Whether it's telemedicine, whether it's teleradiology, telepathology, everything actually can converge to provide remote access. I think the last one that I want to talk about is the research and policy making in the area of public health. And I think we have seen that in the recent past, where whether it's a COVID app, RT-PCR app, or Arogya Setu, a lot of this actually has come together and helped us map COVID infection on real-time basis. I think COVID may just be a trigger. There are a lot of other areas like tuberculosis or hepatitis, many public health diseases where I think this whole integrated setup, data flow happening from private, public, and all together on real-time basis at a central level can be big one. And I think there's National Digital Health Mission, which is doing great job. And I see a great opportunity for our country to utilize some of these technologies. So all in all put together, there is a new business model which is likely to emerge in healthcare post-COVID. A combination of all this or some of it, startup ecosystem can help, because some of the traditional players might find themselves little handicapped on going forward. I think those are the points I wanted to make. Over to you, Anurag.
Thank you. I think that was very insightful, Dr. Manchanda. Let me come to Bidhur now. Bidhur, you have been doing so much cutting edge work on artificial intelligence and a lot of emerging technology recently. It would be great if you can share your insights around what are the areas where you see startups could collaborate, and maybe talk about some of the initiatives where you are working with some of the startups already.
Sure. No, at the outset, thank you so much, Nat Health, for having me here. And, it's especially proud moment for Harshad and myself, since, the Innovation Forum has finally come to fruition. I think, Om sir has covered almost everything that any of us could think of in terms of collaboration opportunities and problems that startups could solve. But in our experience, and maybe I'll just take 15 seconds to tell you all what we're actually building at Caring. So we're building this two-way platform, right? It's an integrated technology platform where you have the analytics ecosystem on one side, which are companies that are building, artificial intelligence software or analytics tools or genomics tools, imaging tools, etc. And on the other side, you have the provider ecosystem that does not have the bandwidth to partner with 50 companies, one for each body part or one for each application. So we're trying to be the intermediary connecting layer that allows you to not only access and integrate, but also assess different types of AI solutions, right? And in our experience of working with almost 30, 35, deep science research groups, this includes startups, the GE Philipses of the world, NVIDIAs of the world, and then, the academic centers, Harvard, Stanford's, etc. We've seen that one crucial thing that differentiates a startup that will find early success and a startup that will, eventually find that success, but maybe after running through a few hoops, is that you pick the problem before you pick the technology. Right. So this is a recurrent theme, right? It's not like people want to solve the problem of, let's say, tuberculosis and then go out and find, what are technologies that I can use to solve tuberculosis, right? It's generally the other way around, where and that's kind of the engineering mindset also, right? Where I have this amazing tool of deep learning, where can I use it, right? And that sets people on this journey of, trying to force fit. Eventually people go through the hoops, and figure out use cases, and we have great examples of that. But that is one piece of advice. And also, as far as AI specifically is concerned, we've seen that people again don't follow the problem, but instead follow the data. Right. So to Om sir's point, data is extremely fragmented. Data is, we all think we have it, and we all think we have some kind of liquid gold in our servers. But the truth is that, none of it is structured. So what happens is that the solutions that start getting developed are on data that is easy to access, and not necessarily the data that is most impactful. Right. And that then again, said, because every person in the world is building a chest x-ray algorithm today, right? Why is everyone building a chest x-ray algorithm? Because you can get access to a million chest x-rays with a single click from Stanford and Mass General Hospital, right? And you can start building AI. So that's the second point. The third and the final most important point is that uh, you cannot build clinical solutions outside of a clinic, right? You cannot assume that your one visit to a doctor as a patient, as a n of one, will give you enough insight to be able to, build a company out of that. And that's where the incubation centers, and that's where forums like these are so powerful, right? Where literally we are saying कि यार आओ and हमारे ऑफिस में बैठो, right? और हमारे डॉक्टर के साथ बैठो, sit with us, see what it feels like to actually talk to a patient and type at the same time, or write with a pen or speak into a mic, and all of those fancy things, and experience it firsthand, and then go out and build that solution. So this is like a very maybe too impassioned plea, but build pick the problem first and then pick the technology, not the other way around. Don't force fit technology into problems. Well, at least that's my experience. Thanks.
8 points. So let me come back to Harshit now. Now you mentioned whether you raised very valid points around availability of data being one of the primary constraints that startups would face. So Harshit, if you are back, I would like to ask you if you would be willing to share anonymized data with some of the startups so that they can start building these applications around monetization of data and analytics around data. Obviously, it would be anonymized patient data or anonymized health data, but would you be okay to share that kind of data with some of the startups, obviously in a controlled environment?
Sure, Anurag. So I'll start off by saying that we did very early on realize that data is going to help us in many ways, and undertook the exercise of structuring our data within the organization. Until very recently, it was done for self-improvement within the organization, and also, for certain clinical parameters to monitor and so on. Apollo follows quite stringent guidelines for its data. We follow the ISO 27001 like everyone does. We also take best practices from HIPAA, NIST, and GDPR. So we try to take best practices there, although we're not mandated to do so. Coming back to your specific question, we would love to be able to share our data in an anonymized way if it is purely used for research. If there is a commercial outlook to taking data from us, obviously, the organization would like to understand that better. We are in the process of formulating a data usage policy. We have a very active ethics committee that looks into all of this. But we do believe that this is something that will be done. That will be done, um, and yes, the organization is quite receptive to that.
Great. That's very encouraging to hear. Let me ask Dr. Manchanda, right? So I think the consensus is that everybody is keen to support startups. Now, if we were to support startups, what kind of parameters do you have in mind, Dr. Manchanda, for shortlisting startups that you are going to support? And what is the approach that ideally some of the startups should be following so that you don't get spam, but obviously you get quality proposals from the industry?
So I think if I look at Bidhur made a very interesting point, is that we certainly don't want to fall into a trap that I have a solution, now I have to look for a problem. I think the most important thing is I need to first know what the problem is, then I have to look for a solution. So it has to be other way around. And in the past, sort of a thing, we have actually have done in sort of a ad hoc manner. We have picked up one process at a time. Let's say, for example, tracking of samples. And some startup has come to us saying that I can help you track the samples. I can help you track, let's say, where the logistics, the courier boy is. It actually makes my entire logistics operation a little more efficient. But then we found out that there's another startup which is working on some other area. Then we found ourselves in a position where we ended up working with lots of such startups. But it has its own downside because data issues, information being shared to some of these small players. I think then we realized that we have to step back a bit and work with all of them in an integrated manner. So I think that's one of the learning, rather than cutting them into pieces and working with multiple startups. Our policy or strategy has been to work with a player actually who has sort of a understanding, and we actually want to grow with that startup. So certainly we don't want to work with multiple stakeholders or players. I would rather work with one or two of them and actually look at a long-term strategic partnership and seeing that startup grow with us as we go forward. For the sake of confidentiality, I can't share right now, but I think we are working with 2 or 3 such companies where the understanding is we are going to be walking this path together. And then they are also assured of that we are committed to their long-term growth. They are committed to us. And I think some of these areas of confidentiality, data privacy, some of these regulatory issues that are revolving around some of these technologies are taken care of. So the short answer for your question is we are willing to work with the startups, but with a very long term in mind rather than hit and run kind of situation.
Thank you. I think that makes perfect sense. So I think we have heard on the data side of it, we have heard a lot of comments and suggestions. But let me come back to the medtech industry and let me ask Meenakshi. We have seen a lot of market dynamics changing because of COVID-19. A lot of medical device startups have emerged, right? So how do you see the co-innovation between these startups and the medical device companies? What are some of the areas where you feel this collaboration can really work out?
So Anurag, I think Ishika's slide captured those 2 buckets, which I thought really said it quite well. One was co-creation and the second is the scale up, right? So broadly, I think that's really the 2 buckets. But to get very specific, I think maybe I'll just give 2 examples. The first is one of the technologies that we are, very big and launching is OR integration, because what we find is operation theaters are often not linked to each other. And what has happened with COVID is that many of the expert doctors who could travel from urban cities to tier 3 towns and so on to train and assist are no longer now willing to travel. So we're seeing a lot of, OR integration where the OT is linked up to another OT in a different hospital in a different city, and the surgeon can guide on surgery. So this is potentially a fantastic technology, and we've got the technology and we will launch it. But with this technology comes some real data that's generated each time we do it. And we are not really focusing on that. So if there was a startup that could come with us and take on the data part of it while we work on the technology and the in surgery, because our ultimate purpose is to make sure that particular surgery goes seamlessly, right? We are not really thinking at that point about the data piece of it, but there's a lot of fantastic data generated each time we have these cross OT surgeries being done. So I think that's a very specific example. Similarly, this is something we're also debating a lot. We've launched an orthopedic robot. It's a fantastic teaching tool. It captures the patient on a CT scan, then patient is in real life, and the whole thing can be a great teaching tool. But once again, we are focused a lot more on delivering the service in the OT, not so much on all the data that we generate. And of course, the data is not ours anyway, it's the hospital's data. So I think there are some very concrete examples where we can work with startups. But as Bidhur was speaking, there's a little bit of a conundrum here, that if we are very clear what the problem is, then most of the time we can probably solve it. But the problem is companies like us are not always exactly specific about what the problem is. We have a vague idea, and then we need someone to jump in. But if they jump in with their technology to force fit that into our problem, it puts us off, right? So I think I'm not trying to solve the problem here, but that I think is a fundamental conundrum we're stuck in, that if we knew exactly what needs to be done, we can probably do it ourselves. Often we don't, but then we don't want to force fit technology. So how we solve that issue, I think, is still an open question. But it's really going to be in either of those two buckets: generate the idea with us and work with us hand in hand. And then second is, if there are some existing ideas that can be fit into our business, we can help very rapidly pilot and scale up. So I'd see those two buckets.
Great. I'm just conscious of the time, right? So let me ask one question to Bidhur, and then we'll open it for audience questions. So Bidhur, I think you saw Amit Mukim's presentation around NDHM and the impact it is going to create. And I'm sure you're working very closely with NDHM as well, right? So we saw digital payments getting revolutionized through the unified payments interface. And now NDHM is planning this unified health interface. So what kind of applications do you think startup can build with you and build in the ecosystem? Because what happened was government created the BHIM app in payments, and then the market opened up for compatible applications. So the same way we are going to see a lot of applications coming up in healthcare. So what are some of the examples that you have in mind or use cases that these startups can solve today?
So that NDHM is such a interesting topic that all of us, I'm sure, in one way or another, have some kind of fantasies related to how it could play out. But I think honestly, Anurag, and to all the entrepreneurs out there, it's a spectrum of impact that you can have through the NDHM framework, if I may, right? So there's the boring stuff, right? The boring stuff is also generally more impactful. So for example, I'm not sure how many people attending are aware, but the central government health scheme and the ECHS, which is the army like armed forces health scheme, are all moving on to NDHM, right, through NHA. And there is tremendous opportunity to automate a lot of the billing processes that are there. So till today, I'm all of our organizations have rooms filled with people who are just scanning documents and printing documents and then checking those documents and then scanning them again, and then there's one guy solving queries and all of that, and across multiple platforms. But now with NHA coming in on the backbone of NDHM, there's a tremendous opportunity to just not just do automation innovation, but also financial innovation, right? What if there was a quasi fintech startup that was to say that, I will take care of all your debtors as far as, the debtors on the NDHM framework are concerned. I will take care of all of them, so I will pay you X amount of money on day zero. And then I go ahead, I recover, 1.1x or something like that after 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. That's innovation, right? And I'm sure most people in the country will sign up for that. But that's the boring part, right? Then we go to the clinical side of things. Right now, I'm a patient, I'm going across multiple hospitals. First I go to an Apollo hospital, I get a some kind of treatment or consultation or diagnostic test there. then maybe I hop across to Max Hospital. Now, theoretically, my data should flow with me through the NDHM, so-called pipes. But somebody has to build those pipes, right? I don't think the government is actually building the data flow engines, right? They're building the frameworks, they're building the consenting mechanisms, they're building the app structures, but somebody has to set up the process to pull from here, send to there, so that the repeatability of consultation and diagnostics tests, etc., does not happen. So, and once you have that in line, then you start applying your AI, ML, decision support, etc., kind of things on top of that, because once you have the data going through your pipe, for lack of a better word, is only when you can start having those kind of impacts. So it's a very wide spectrum of innovation that is possible in NDHM, and I think anybody who wants to do anything in health tech should certainly follow the field, and both the exciting and the boring parts, not just the exciting parts.
Thanks, Bidhur. I think that was extremely insightful. So in the interest of time, I was just looking at the questions that we have from the audience. I think we have addressed most of these questions. So let me hand it over to the next panel now and switch over to the next session.